Welcome into College Football Breakdown with Joe Lisi. We're going to be going over the national championship game between the Alabama Crimson Tide and the Georgia Bulldogs. Find them on Twitter at @GoForThe2. Joe, welcome in. How you doing today, buddy?
Oh, looking forward to a great national championship game. Georgia and Alabama, very intriguing battle. SEC heavy, but to me, it doesn't get better than this, Drew.
And Joe, so we got Bama -3.5 at 5 Dimes and Heritage. Looks like if you're looking to bet Georgia, Bet Online is the place as we speak right now because they're catching 4. 44.5 the total, some 45s out there pretty much across the board at SBR odds right now. What are you thinking about this disagreement in the line right now, 3.5 or 4? What side of the fence do you stand, Joe?
Yeah, I've been all over the Georgia Bulldogs all season long. I picked them at the beginning of the year to be a playoff team. They followed through and came through against Oklahoma with a double overtime win. I was very impressed with the offense and defensive line play, especially in the second half. I think when you look at Georgia overall, rushing for 317 yards against Oklahoma, averaging 9.3 yards per carry, that makes them very effective and allows quarterback Jacob Fromm to work off of play action. I mean, he had a very efficient day, completing 20 of 29 passes against Oklahoma's defense. But a cause of concern for this ball game is third down conversions. Georgia only converted 3 of 11 third downs against Oklahoma. If they put in that type of effort in the national championship game against Alabama, I think it'll be a long day. But I feel Kirby Smart has an advantage here, not just from a defensive perspective, but offensively as well, because of the running backs in this ball game. You look at Elijah Holyfield, DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, and Sony Michel, how they could be utilized in the short to intermediate passing game to really open up Alabama. For me, Kirby Smart understands the personnel of Alabama. He's coached under Nick Saban, recruited a lot of that defensive talent. So he understands the strengths and weaknesses, which really could benefit Georgia's offense in this ball game. But I really feel that Georgia needs to be aggressive early on, attack Alabama vertically on seam routes to neutralize their rush, and more importantly, neutralize their speed. If they run on first and second down, it'll be a long day, but I really like Georgia in this matchup.
And Joe, you bring up Kirby Smart. He's 21-6 as a head coach. You know, he's been at Georgia, 2 years now, 2-0 in bowl games. He was the Alabama DC from 2008 to 2015. You know, that 2-0 in bowl game thing, I would use it normally very heavily when betting bowl games, even though it's a short sample size. But here, it's only a 7-day turnaround. You know, 1 week preparation. It's like a normal week as far as coaching preparation goes. So are you using that into your handicap very much?
Well, I think in this game, obviously now we have a body of work for both teams. We saw Georgia against Oklahoma. We saw Alabama against Clemson. And when you talk about the best game planner in college football, I mean, Nick Saban is it, winning 5 national championships, 1 with LSU and 4 with Alabama, and has a possibility to tie Bear Bryant and overtake, you know, be the best coach in modern day like Bear Bryant. I mean, here's the issue for Alabama. When you break down their offense from the start of the year until what we see now, that's the difference that I have and why I lean towards Georgia. The first 7 games of the year, Alabama's offense, Drew, averaged 302 rushing yards per game. They also rushed for 24 touchdowns in the first 7 games of the year. That's right in the area of about 3.5 to 3.6 rushing touchdowns per game. In the last 5 games against better competition, teams like Mississippi State, LSU from the SEC West, Alabama only averaged 213 rushing yards per game and 2.4 rushing touchdowns during that span, almost a touchdown less per game. They're going up against one of the most physical and speedy defenses in Georgia that can run sideline to sideline. But when you look at Alabama offensively, they only passed for 120 yards against Clemson's defense. This isn't a high-powered Alabama offense with Jalen Hurts this year. I mean, they've needed to run the football to work off of play action. Outside of Calvin Ridley, they really don't have a complement wide receiver. I mean, I think the game plan is this. If you're Alabama, you want to get into a lower scoring game against Georgia, just the way you did against Clemson. if you're Georgia, I think you want to force a little bit of the tempo here because of the offensive playmakers that they have. Now, Jake Fromm is a freshman, granted, but he has complement players around him. You look at Weems, you look at Terry Godwin that stepped up in the second half of that ball game, and the running backs to be utilized in the short to intermediate passing game. I think that's where Georgia could have an advantage. Kirby Smart, though, from rematch situations from 2016 through 2017, has been rock solid as a game planner, 5-0, and has won those games by 31.5 points per game. And when you look at what he was able to do last week with second half adjustments against Oklahoma, that's where I really like Kirby Smart. I think he really understands the pulse of this team. And I'm rolling the dice with Georgia. A couple of factors why I like Georgia as well. Game is played in Atlanta, pro-Georgia type of crowd. They've played in this atmosphere in the SEC championship game against Auburn, so they understand what's ahead of them. I just think that Georgia has the playmakers offensively to challenge Alabama. All things being equal, does Georgia have the personnel to stretch that Alabama defense vertically? I think they do. They need to be aggressive, but that's why I like the Bulldogs in this matchup.
Joe, I mean, you're saying they're going to be pro-Georgia. I don't know. I might take the other side of that, man. I know that each team gets a certain allotment of tickets. And you bring up Georgia playing Auburn there in the SEC championship, or in the first game of the year. Alabama also played in this game. We know that kind of the Roll Tide Nation travels well. So I don't know if I would put too much emphasis on Georgia having kind of a home field advantage.
Well, let's keep in mind that Georgia hasn't played in a national championship game since 1980. We're talking about 38 years. You're talking about a Georgia fan base that has been looking forward to this game. Keep in mind, both teams played in the SEC championship game 4 years ago with Aaron Murray and Mark Richt at the helm for Georgia. I mean, they were in an opportunity to win that ball game and got stopped on the 5-yard line. So there's a lot of Georgia fans that have been looking for this opportunity. You look at StubHub, the site crashed when they put up the national championship tickets. The cheapest price for a championship ticket is $2,400, and that's because of the Georgia fan base just running to get tickets at an all-time high. So I really think it's the other way. Even though Alabama's been here before, it's status quo. When you look at the flip side, playing in the state of Georgia in Atlanta, I expect a pro-heavy Georgia crowd for this matchup.
Yeah, good point. Angie brought up the SEC championship from a couple of years ago, that tip pass. And what they went on to, Bama went on to beat Notre Dame. So Georgia was a tip pass away from smoking Notre Dame as well, most likely. But Joe, also want to get your opinion on the total. We got 44.5 or 45 pretty much across the board at all the sports books on SBR odds right now. Do you have any opinion either on the under or the over and maybe a final score for the viewers?
Yeah, I do. I think I'm going over here. I mean, you look at the last two national championship games have been way over. Now, that was with Clemson's type of offense, a wide open attack. But in a national championship game, even though all the tendencies point to an under because of the blue collar type of play within the SEC, keep in mind both offenses are going to look to score points. You still have the overtime factor. There's no way in a national championship game, even though with the total hanging at 44.5, 45, that I can watch a game and take the under here, especially in this type of atmosphere. I mean, I think if you are the Georgia Bulldogs, you want to strike fast in this ball game. You have to give the edge in terms of quarterback experience to Alabama and Jalen Hurts. He's 26-2 as a starter, back-to-back national championship games. But I really feel it does come down to both defenses in this ball game. Which offense can attack both defenses will really win this ball game. I think Georgia has the type of personnel to put pressure on Alabama's defense. I'll say this about the way you beat Alabama, and people could disagree with me. I really don't care. If you're going to run and pass laterally into Alabama's defense, meaning in short to intermediate hitch routes or slant patterns where you allow linebackers or cornerbacks to jump pass routes, you're not going to win that type of ball game. You need to be aggressive on first and second down with the play action passing game, either on dig routes, 15-yard dig routes, post patterns, or seam patterns to loosen up that front seven of Alabama. That's the way you beat the Crimson Tide. It doesn't matter if you complete passes. As long as you force them to think of pass on first and second down, that'll open up running lanes later in the ball game. And I think if Georgia takes that type of approach, number one, it'll take a lot of pressure off of Jake Fromm being in long third down situations. And really, if they score first, could put the pressure on Jalen Hurts to match Georgia score for score. Alabama does a great job, as best as anyone in the country, of jumping up early and putting the pressure on opposing offenses, which allows their defense to really pin back its ears and really go after the opposing quarterbacks. That's the difference for each ball club. Georgia needs to be aggressive offensively and force Jalen Hurts to match them score for score. If they do that, I think they'll be in this ball game from start to finish. I think it's a 7-point game, though, Drew. I'm going to go high scoring. Georgia 34, Alabama 27.
And for your final prediction, would you say Georgia on the money line? To throw a little bit on the money line, or do you feel a little safer catching?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you look at the last two national championships. Here's the thing: when you look at the Vegas angle, Alabama's laying 4.5 points. The last two games against Clemson, Alabama laid 6.5 points respectively in back-to-back years. Last year, the line opened up at 6. Went up to 6.5. 2 years ago, it opened up right around 6.5, got bet down to 6, and then back up to 6.5. It was, and you look at the Georgia line, it's lower than that. So Vegas has given Georgia a very good chance to win this ball game. I think when you look at it, first time in a national championship game since 1980, I think it's all hands on deck. I think Kirby Smart does have a coaching advantage in the fact that he understands the personnel for Alabama, not just from his defensive perspective, but from an offensive perspective to really help game plan against the strengths and weaknesses of the Alabama Crimson Tide defense. Why wouldn't you take Georgia on the money line? If you're going to take them with the 4.5 or 3.5, you got to take them with the money line. To me, you're playing with house money.
Nice, Joe. Well, yeah, man, thanks for the advice all season long. Final record here, what, you went 40-27-1, hitting just under 60%, 59.7%. So great season for you here with your SBR videos, Joe. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it as well, Drew. It's been a great year. College football is great. It should be a really intriguing national championship game. I mean, Nick Saban has an opportunity to make history here. So does Kirby Smart. When you look at really second-year head coaches, look at the job that Scott Frost did with UCF and turning that program around in just 2 straight years. Same thing with Kirby Smart. 2 years ago, a lot of people ran out Mark Richt for a 10-3 year. They made the right choice because Kirby Smart has the Bulldogs barking all the way to Atlanta.
Joe, real quick before we shut it down, does UCF have an argument here to be in the playoff?
Here's the thing, Drew. I think when you look at UCF's season, 13-0, I mean, a fantastic year. I think the one thing that when you break down the non-Power 5 teams, if they did it each and every week playing in the SEC, would they be possibly 13-0? And that's the argument. Yes, in a one-game atmosphere, anything can happen, and credit, a great job by UCF. But if they had to play an SEC East or an SEC West schedule throughout the year, could they be as battle-tested as they were playing in their conference in the AAC? And I think that's the argument that you have to make for the Power 5 teams. I mean, they do it each and every week, and they got there. That's the one argument that you have to look at in terms of the non-Power 5 teams. But it's a great season for Scott Frost. But I do feel the 2 best teams in the country at this point in the season are Alabama and Georgia. I don't want them to dilute the regular season in any way, shape, or form. Let's keep it at 4. Controversy's been a part of college football for as long as I can remember.
All right. Well, if you disagree with Joe, go give him a follow at GoForThe2 on Twitter. He's a great follow. He'll interact with you. So, yeah, Joe, great season, 40-27-1 here with the SBR videos. Look forward to speaking with you, from time to time in the offseason, going over recruiting and also, season win totals with the South Point releasing those earlier and earlier every year. So, yeah, Joe, best of luck in the national championship game. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.